Today on Drive Through History, we're going to talk about the Adams family. No, not the creepy, kooky, altogether ooky Adams family. I'm talking about John Adams, the second president of the United States, his wife and trusted lifelong advisor, Abigail, and their son, John Quincy Adams. Few families have been as important or influential to this great nation. We will start in a part of Massachusetts that used to be called Braintree, but then became Quincy, or Quincy, if you want to get down with the local lingo. Here we will find the birthplace, along with the stately mansion of the Adams family, dating back 4 generations. Then we will spend a little time in Washington, D.C., where John and Abigail were the first occupants of that cozy cottage we now call the White House, and where John Quincy Adams spent so much of his life as president, diplomat, and 17 years in Congress. Now, Quincy, Massachusetts is also known as the birthplace of both Dunkin' Donuts and Howard Johnson. But today, I'm here in search of Adams family history. Now, let's check out the humble abode that helped form the character of one of our greatest Americans, Founding Father John Adams.
Buckle up. Behind me, on this rather ordinary city street, lies an obviously old, New England, salt box colonial-style home. This home, so simple and unassuming, was the birthplace and childhood home of John Adams. John Adams, the co-author of the Declaration of Independence, George Washington's vice president, and the second president of the United States. And believe it or not, those descriptions barely scratch the surface of this amazing man's great achievements and qualities. John Adams was born here in 1735. He was America's first vice president and second president. He was a sponsor of the American Revolution in Massachusetts. In fact, Thomas Jefferson once called him the Colossus of Independence. And because Adams was an author and a statesman, he helped define the Republican ideals that were central to America's political value system. He rejected King George's authority in favor of rule by the people. When John Adams was born here in 1735, this was the typical colonial design. It's called a salt box because of its shape. It's shaped like the boxes that they kept salt in. It's simple, easy to build, and energy efficient, which is important if you're the one chopping wood to keep it warm. First, notice the chimney. It's centrally located so that the fireplaces could evenly distribute the heat throughout the entire house. And this 2-story side of the house faces south for maximum exposure to the sun. And the 1-story north side faces the north wind with minimal windows. You know, hand any second grader a crayon, tell them to draw a house. You're gonna get something that looks a lot like this. It's the quintessential look of the all-American home.
This was the home of 4 generations of Adams and was given to the U.S. government in 1946. This national treasure is open to the public, and you will be amazed at the rich history that you will find here. It is one of those places where you can get up close and personal to history. Many of the personal items of John, Abigail, and John Quincy are here and presented to show how they were actually used in the home. At the age of 90, John Adams died on July 4th, 1825. It was the 50th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence. His last words were said to be, "Thomas Jefferson survives." Unknown to Adams, Thomas Jefferson had died earlier that very same day. So ended the lives of 2 signatories of the Declaration of Independence. How close the lives of these 2 men had been intertwined. It was Adams and Jefferson that are given most of the credit for the drafting and approval of the Declaration of Independence. They both served our fledgling country in France. Thomas Jefferson would serve as Adams' vice president, and then he ran against him and defeated him, which sent John Adams back to Quincy to once again become a patriot farmer. It is said that Adams was depressed and angered by his defeat, and he did not communicate with Thomas Jefferson for many years after that. But it was their mutual friend, Dr. Benjamin Rush, who served in a role as peacemaker and encouraged the two to let bygones be bygones. The nation is so much the richer for it because the two reconciled and began an exchange of letters that lasted 14 years and included 158 letters. The letters between the two former presidents and revolutionary leaders offer a key insight into the minds of these two great men, to the Revolutionary War and the subsequent period of early American history. John Adams had a deep love and affection for the nation that he helped create. As he said in a letter to a friend, "Our obligations to our country never cease, but with our lives."
Today we're going to talk about Abigail Adams. Her husband, John Adams, was the second president of the United States, and she was an indispensable help to him, becoming his closest advisor. Now, additionally, she served as a war correspondent to him during the Revolution. She also managed a successful business, and she helped raise a family that would go on to have positive impact on America for generations. Now, she was not only the wife, but also a mother of a U.S. president, John Quincy Adams. So she was kind of like an early Barbara Bush, both the wife and the mother of a president. In many ways, Abigail Adams proves the rule that behind every great man is a great woman. Excuse me. Speaking of, my great woman. Give me a minute here, guys. Cut. Yeah, hi, sweetie pumpkin schnookums. Yeah. Yeah, I need you to send me some things that I forgot for the trip. Yeah, if you could send my underoos. Yeah, the Spider-Man ones. Also, I need the toothbrush, the electric toothbrush. The Snoopy one. You got it? And I need my iPod, okay? Okay, and I want you to load the Mary-Kate and Ashley Dance Remix CD, okay? No, I bought it last week. I know you don't understand. I like them, okay? I know you don't understand. All right, sweetie, we don't have time for this. We're filming, okay? All right, love you too, pumpkin schnookums. Okay, kiss, kiss. You guys ready to hit it? Abigail Adams was born on November 11th, 1744 in Weymouth, Massachusetts, the daughter of a socially prominent Congregational minister. Now, even though Abigail came from the upper crust, she never received a formal education. In Abigail Adams' lifetime, girls had limited opportunities. Their lives were usually mapped out for them from cradle to the grave. What education young girls did receive centered around managing household and other domestic duties.
Her father, the Reverend William Smith, gave his children an unusual gift for the 1700s, full access to his extensive library. Books at that time were rare and precious. For young girls like Abigail, such a privilege was unheard of.
During the pre-revolutionary era, women didn't even have legal status or the right to vote. Access to colleges and universities was strictly out of the question. It didn't matter what the books were about, history, science, politics, political theory, she devoured them all, which is why I think she and I are kindred spirits.
Abigail developed a love for learning that she retained all her life, preparing her for the important role in American history she would later play.
And by the time she was an adult, she was able to master reading in French and Latin. But because she was self-taught, there were some gaps in her education. Like she had poor spelling, and she wasn't able to use punctuation properly. Like when some of you guys use way too many exclamation points in an email. Yeah, and a colon and a parentheses does not make a smiley face, all right? Oh, you don't do that? You don't do that? Oh, no, I think you do. Yeah, I think you do.
Because of Abigail's embarrassment over her poor penmanship and bad grammar, she begged her husband to destroy her letters to him. But fortunately for us, John Adams ignored her pleas. Today, the historical value of Abigail Adams' letters is priceless because they provide clues to the past and details of the American Revolution. The letters are also now considered to be among the finest examples of writing from an American woman of that era in their wit, literary quality, and insight.
During the Revolutionary War, while the men were off fighting for America's freedom on the battlefield and in government courts, women served as patriots on the home front. They went to military camps to help the army. They served as spies. They boycotted British goods. They tended the sick and wounded. They defended their homesteads, and some even served as soldiers. Abigail Adams fit the role of a brave patriot perfectly, and she loved America passionately. She was compelled by a desire to see her country free of tyranny.
Abigail faced many of the difficulties of the American Revolution by herself. The British wanted to find her husband John and execute him for his role in leading the American patriots. Additionally, he had served as a delegate to the Continental Congress, and because of his great prominence in the cause, he was dispatched as a diplomat to Europe. Consequently, between his congressional duties and his overseas assignments, John and Abigail went 3 years without seeing each other. It was a time of struggle and hardship. With John gone, all the responsibilities of the family fell to Abigail. She suddenly had to get her hands dirty with farming and keep a business running, all on her own. Neighbors reported to her husband that they had never seen his homestead look so good. She learned to make investments by herself, hire and fire servants, and plant at the right time. And she educated the children herself, providing them with both academic and spiritual training.
Abigail Adams cared not only for her own family, but also for those of others, as she took in many who were homeless due to the war. And there were times when precious family heirlooms were donated in the cause of American freedom. She even graciously gave away pewter spoons to be melted down into bullets for the troops.
It was a brutal time. Throughout that period, the revolution raged around the family. Night and day, Abigail and her children were in danger, with enemies moving to and fro near the family home.
Because of Abigail's clear intelligence and quick thinking, espionage became a part of her duties. And John began to rely on Abigail's letters for detailed, accurate information about events in New England, including British plans and troop movements. Now, John not only shared this information with Congress, but he also praised her to a friend, saying, "She has clearer and fuller intelligence than I can find in a whole committee of gentlemen."
Abigail helped not only in political and military areas during the American Revolution, but also in social areas. As a young girl, Abigail accompanied her mother, a minister's wife, on her rounds to visit the sick and the poor. Her mother's outward expression of her religious beliefs in helping the helpless made a deep impression on Abigail. She spoke out forcefully against slavery. She believed it was wrong to be fighting for freedom from the British while denying that same freedom to others in America. Once America became an independent nation, Abigail challenged the new leaders to rethink their views of women. Writing of her feelings to her husband John, Abigail boldly stated that it was hypocritical to proclaim peace and goodwill to men, while at the same time retaining absolute power over your wives. Abigail understood that an educated woman could better perform her duties as a wife, mother, and household manager. In a letter to John, she lamented the lack of educational opportunities for women and spoke of a desire to see a nation comprised of heroes, statesmen, philosophers, and learned women. During her lifetime, Abigail Adams witnessed significant improvement in the treatment of slaves, when several northern states abolished slavery and extended to former slaves the right to vote. She also witnessed an improvement in attitudes toward women, as some academic schools for women were started.
Abigail never experienced the joy of seeing slavery abolished in the entire nation, nor did she see major changes in national policies regarding women. But nevertheless, her son, John Quincy Adams, the 6th President of the United States, took up Abigail's cause and was instrumental in abolishing slavery. Others followed her lead as well, not only on slavery but other issues, gradually improving the opportunities of all people, regardless of race or gender. Abigail Adams, the First Lady of the 2nd President of the United States, wrote hundreds of letters recording the history of our young country's road to independence from a unique and feminine perspective.
After her husband's presidency, the couple, finally free to spend the twilight of their lives together and uninterrupted, retired to their hometown of Quincy, Massachusetts. She died on October 28, 1818. As a young lady, wife, mother, writer, and First Lady, Abigail Adams exemplified a bright, capable, feisty, and virtuous woman. Her writings have allowed us to see the birth of a nation through the heart and mind of a smart, articulate woman whose quill pen wielded true power and might. Abigail Adams was indeed a perfect role model for a young nation's young ladies.
Have you ever felt like a complete failure, that your best just wasn't good enough and everyone was out to get you? Have you? You have? You haven't? You have? You have not? You have. Well, if you have ever felt that way, well, you're in good company. There was another person who felt that way, and he was a U.S. president. Nobody seemed to like this guy, not even members of his own political party.
On July 11, 1767, John Quincy Adams was born in Braintree, Massachusetts. He was the son of John Adams, a signer of the Declaration of Independence, who went on to become the second president of the United States, and his mother, Abigail, was also a hero and patriot of the Revolution. John Quincy had a dramatic childhood. At age 7, he stood on top of a hill with his mother, Abigail, from a spot now known as the Abigail Adams Cairn.
This is the Abigail Adams Cairn. It marks the spot where Abigail and her young son, a mere lad of only 7 years old, John Quincy Adams, witnessed the burning of Charlestown on June 17, 1775, during the Battle of Bunker Hill.
Together they watched the first major battle of the Revolutionary War play out in the distance. As the war went on, it became obvious that we needed the help of the French, and the Continental Congress sent John Adams to France to ask for their support. Mr. Adams knew he would be away for some time. He wanted the companionship of young John Quincy and knew it would be an amazing learning experience.
Johnny's trip to France was dangerous for two reasons. First, no one put out to sea from Boston in the wintertime. It was extremely dangerous. But it was also extremely dangerous to sail during wartime, especially when the enemy was specifically looking for his father, John Adams.
Hi kids, Uncle Davy here, standing out in front of the French Embassy. Now the reason we're standing here is, excuse me, pardon me a second. Yep. Yeah, well, it's the same colors though. Yes, well, the kids are going to be mighty disappointed to hear that. Well, I understand. All right. Okay, got it. I can take it from here. Thank you. All right. Well, apparently this is not the French embassy. Apparently it's the embassy to the country of the Netherlands. Is that even a country? Never heard of such a thing. Nevertheless, if you turn your television upside down, that flag will look a heck of a lot more like the French flag. So we'll just roll with the punches. Excuse me. Now, the whole reason why we're talking about the French is because John Quincy Adams, who later became the 6th president of these United States, went on an ultimate boyhood adventure to the great country of France. He was able to accompany his father, John Adams, who was the 2nd president of the United States, who had been appointed commissioner of the United States to France. Now, 10-year-old John Quincy was able to be gone from home for a total of 3 years. Now, I do love French culture, so one of my favorite delicacies of the great country of France is a roll that some people like to call a crescent. Well, they'd be way off. It's not called a crescent at all. That's the wrong pronunciation of it. The name of this roll, my friends, is called a croissant. Croissant. Say it with me, kids. Croissant. There, you're croissant. Okay, you keep working at it. You keep working at it. T is silent. The T is silent. croissant. Get it? Got it? All right. But I don't like to have my croissant without a little bit of fromage, which is, of course, the French word for cheese. Now, I don't like that cheese that crumbles up in your fingers and turns green and gets moldy. No, thank you. I like the good stuff. I like my cheese in a can. This stuff lasts forever. Yep. Expiration date sometime in 2017. So what I do is I spread her on there real good. You get a lot of cheese on there. Yes, sir. That's how the French do it. And get it on there good. Well, bon appetit. Or as they say in France, well, bon appetit.
With the pressure of the war, the Adams were forced to set sail in winter as quickly as possible. Blinding storms and chilling 14-degree temperatures delayed the 3,000-mile voyage across the North Atlantic for 2 days. Passengers were often afflicted with diseases and difficulties such as leaky vessels and unfavorable weather. During the 6-week voyage to France, Johnny's father also made sure that Johnny continued his formal education, including lessons from the Bible. One unexpected lesson came about through a fellow traveler. French surgeon Nicolas Noel spoke English and liked Johnny so much that he taught him French. This would be key because just a few years later, Johnny's proficiency in French won him the honor of being the youngest diplomat in American history. And although he was only 11 years old, Johnny received a congressional diplomatic appointment as the official secretary to his father, John Adams, ambassador to France. The Boston eventually landed safely in Europe. Years later, throughout his distinguished political career, John Quincy Adams often related braving the storms aboard the Boston as a child to the storminess of politics he faced as an adult. John Quincy Adams learned that it was the difficult times in life, not the smooth sailing times, when our character is best shaped and molded.
John Quincy's solid character, assorted experiences, and willingness to learn fully equipped him to be a noted American diplomat. He served as an ambassador to 5 different countries under 3 different presidents. He was a Massachusetts legislator, a U.S. senator, a university professor, and a United States president. And in his spare time, he was a noted author, and he penned a number of religious poems. Almost enough for me to think I'm an underachiever.
John Quincy Adams didn't really have the greatest time as president. It was rocky from the get-go. When he was elected as president, he received so few votes that the decision went before the House of Representatives, where he later won the presidency by 1 lone vote. Although he did not have a broad base of support, John Quincy was nevertheless inaugurated as America's 6th president in 1825 at age 57, thus becoming the first son to follow in his father's footsteps as president. John Quincy Adams was a political nonconformist who cared less about what people thought of him than what was right or wrong. He was a deeply religious and outspoken Christian. In fact, in 1848, his letters to his 10-year-old son on how to read through the Bible once a year were published as a book to benefit all young Americans. Adams also served as a vice president of the American Bible Society. When it came time for re-election, Andrew Jackson easily defeated him. Adams left Washington with most folks assuming he was finished with public service, yet nothing was further from the truth. There was no quit in him. He soon re-entered politics as a congressman.
In Adams' second career, he became the first ever ex-president to be elected to the House of Representatives. Now, becoming a congressman after a president was unconventional. It just wasn't done. It seemed a little bit belittling. But Adams didn't care what other people thought of him. In fact, of being elected to Congress, he wrote, "No election or appointment has ever given me so much pleasure. Even my presidency was not half as satisfying."
As a congressman, Adams' stature started to grow. Even enemies who strongly differed with Adams on issues respected him. Although Adams was their opponent, they knew him as a man of integrity, who was thoroughly truthful and who always did what he believed to be right. He adamantly opposed slavery. His outspoken opposition to slavery brought him criticism and more than a dozen death threats. Most members of the House were pro-slavery, so Adams lost nearly every anti-slavery measure he introduced. Nevertheless, he persisted. Although suffering numerous defeats, Adams never gave up because he had adopted the philosophy, duty is ours, results are God's. He was determined to always do what was right and leave the results to God. In speeches, he often quoted from the Bible to justify his position that slavery was wrong and should be ended.
John Quincy Adams so loved the position of United States Congressman that he declared he hoped he would die in the pursuit of duty. He got his wish. In 1848, he suffered a stroke on the floor of the House and died 2 days later inside the Capitol in the chamber of Robert Winthrop, the Speaker of the House. By the time of his death, John Quincy Adams had been re-elected to Congress 8 times.
One of his admirers, minister and poet Ralph Waldo Emerson, summed up the feelings of many when he called Adams, quote, a bruiser who loved a good fight, proving that when life hands you disappointments, you should never be discouraged, and that with every pitted valley there is also a mountain. John Quincy Adams never yielded an inch throughout his long life of his cherished principles or gave up the good fight. Because of these traits, John Quincy Adams tenaciously helped secure the freedom and equality that we experience in America today.